Hooked from the first second are 3 connected intro lines. What if the deepest wound in your heart didn't come from a stranger, but from someone who once held your hand at the dinner table? What if the person who hurt you most knew exactly how to do it because they grew up knowing where your scars were? This isn't just betrayal. It's betrayal with a familiar face. And that's what makes it cut so much deeper. You know, people love to say blood is thicker than water. It's one of those phrases we grow up hearing, almost like gospel truth. But here's what they forget to mention. Even blood can turn poisonous when the heart behind it goes cold. The deepest kind of pain, it doesn't come from enemies or strangers. It comes from family, from people who are never supposed to be the source of your tears. The betrayal of a stranger, it stings, yes. But when that betrayal comes from a sibling, someone who grew up in the same house, shared your birthdays, laughed at the same cartoons, bowed their head beside yours at the dinner table, that's a different kind of pain. It doesn't just sting, it sinks. It gets under your skin and shakes your foundation. It makes you question what love really means, and if loyalty was ever truly mutual. Let me say something you might not hear often, something the world might not want to admit out loud. Sharing the same DNA doesn't give someone the right to keep hurting you. Yes, we're taught to forgive. 70 times 7, they say. And forgiveness is powerful. It's freeing. But nowhere in that lesson does it say you have to keep standing there, smiling while someone you love keeps carving the same wound into your soul. Forgiveness is about unchaining your heart from bitterness, about releasing yourself from the weight of anger. But it is not an invitation for repeated betrayal. There are siblings who treat your loyalty like it's unconditional, like it's something you owe them no matter how they treat you. You cover for them, you defend them, you stretch yourself thin hoping that when it really matters, they'll be there for you too. But instead, they take your kindness and twist it. They manipulate your trust. They rewrite your intentions, and they do it all with a smile on their face. Why? Because they believe you'll always take it. They've mistaken your love for weakness. And the moment you draw a boundary, the moment you say no more, they flip the script. Suddenly you're the problem. You're the one who changed. But the truth is, you just got tired of bleeding. In silence. Let me be clear. Repeated disrespect, especially from a sibling, isn't something you should keep tolerating just because you share a last name. When someone mocks your values, minimizes your dreams, or disrespects your boundaries again and again, they're not acting from love. They're acting from control. And honestly, I don't care if you share 20 years of family dinners or our photo albums full of smiling faces. If that person is draining your spirit, undermining your peace, it's time to draw the line. Because yes, you can still love them. You can still pray for their healing, still wish them well. But you can also love them from a safe distance. That doesn't make you cold. That doesn't make you heartless. That makes you whole. Sometimes healing requires space. Sometimes it means letting go, not with bitterness, not with anger, but with a quiet strength that says, I choose peace. There are betrayals that should absolutely be forgiven, but never forgotten. Because with wisdom comes protection. With clarity comes freedom. Here's the raw truth. Family was meant to be a blessing, not a battlefield. The people God places in our lives should lift us, not drag us through guilt, shame, and manipulation. And if your sibling consistently chooses pride over peace, ego over empathy, and disrespect over real relationship, then maybe, just maybe, you're not the one who needs fixing. Soft transition to page 2. So what do you do when the love you gave becomes the wound you carry? when the silence is no longer peace, but a weight. Let's walk into that truth together in page 2. Opening bridge to maintain flow from page 1. Any Rio or Sweden, you've come to the point where silence is no longer peace, where choosing yourself doesn't feel selfish, but necessary. And now, here's the truth you need to hear loud and clear. You are not the villain for choosing clarity over chaos. You're the one who finally opened your eyes. And today, I want to remind you, you are under no obligation to keep accepting betrayal just to preserve the illusion of a perfect family photo. God isn't interested in how polished your family portrait looks. What matters to him is not the number of bloodlines you keep intact, but the condition of your heart, the soul ties you protect, and the peace you maintain within. You are responsible for your spirit. You are the gatekeeper of the atmosphere you allow inside your heart. Now hear me on this. God can restore anything. He is a God of second chances, of healing, of redemption. But here's the part most people don't talk about. Restoration starts with honesty. And sometimes that honesty leads to a hard truth, that you've been holding up the weight of a one-sided relationship for far too long. Sometimes love doesn't mean holding on. It means letting go. Not letting go of the person entirely, but letting go of the illusion, not abandoning them, but loving them with your eyes wide open, loving them with discernment, loving them with healthy boundaries. Because when someone continually disrespects you, dishonors you, and then expects you to keep tolerating it, not because they've changed, but because they share your last name, they're not really asking share for forgiveness. They're asking for permission. Permission to keep wounding you again and again, but not anymore. Let this be the moment you take back your peace. Let this be the season where you stop confusing loyalty with being a doormat. You were never created to carry that burden alone. You were not placed on this earth to endure silent suffering while calling it family loyalty. God created you for something better, for freedom, for joy, for relationships that mirror his love, not control, not manipulation, not emotional blackmail wrapped in a bow labeled, but we're family. So if you've been asking yourself in the quiet hours, am I a bad person for walking away? Am I wrong for setting boundaries? Let me tell you plainly, no, you're not wrong. You're not heartless. You are finally healing. There's a kind of betrayal that wears a warm smile. It claps for you when others are watching. But the hands are hollow. It sits across from you at the dinner table, pretending to cheer you on. But inside it burns with bitterness. It hides behind inside jokes and half-hearted congratulations. But if you're listening, really listening, you'll feel it. Sometimes betrayal doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the sibling you trusted, the one you thought would be in your corner forever. But behind closed doors, while you prayed for success, they were hoping you'd fall. Not because you harmed them, but because they couldn't handle the light God placed on you. Life, jealousy doesn't scream. It whispers. It hides in the shadows. It doesn't attack directly. It mocks gently. It jokes. It questions your efforts with a smile. And when jealousy festers, it doesn't clap when you rise. It keeps score. And when it feels like it's losing, it doesn't build alongside you. It tears you down quietly, subtly, consistently. That's not love. That's not support. That is sabotage. It's betrayal wearing the mask of family. You see, God didn't bless you so that others could punish you for growing. Your breakthrough, your elevation, your light, it is not a sin. But to the heart twisted by envy, Your rise feels like their fall. And so they begin to scheme, to undercut, to diminish, not openly, not always cruelly, but with the kind of passive aggression that wounds just as deeply. And the worst part, they act like it's nothing. They'll laugh it off, call you sensitive, pretend they meant no harm, but your soul knows. Your spirit feels it because betrayal has an echo. It lingers long after the words are spoken, long after the joke is over. Soft transition to page 3. And if you felt that echo, if you've been shrinking yourself to keep the peace, it's time to talk about what real healing looks like when you finally stop apologizing for your life. Shall we continue? An opening line to bridge from page 2. You've carried the weight long enough, shrinking your joy, second-guessing your light, just to make someone else feel comfortable in your glow. But maybe, just maybe, you've tried to pretend nothing was wrong. You told yourself they were just going through something. You said they don't mean it. You brushed it off, blaming their words on stress, their distance on insecurity, their sarcasm on immaturity. You made excuses. You minimized the damage. You gave the benefit of the doubt again and again. But let me say this to you clearly with no sugarcoating. When someone actively moves against your calling, when they plant seeds of doubt, spread whispers behind your back, or pull people away from you, that's not struggle, that's sabotage. And sabotage, especially from someone who knows your heart, is betrayal in its most personal form. You are allowed to release the weight. Yes, forgive. Let go of the bitterness. But you're not required to keep walking hand in hand with someone who's secretly hoping you trip. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself. Closeness, however, is earned. Some people might say to you, but that's your sibling. You're supposed to stick together. And honestly, I agree, but not unconditionally. We are supposed to walk together. But not if walking with them costs you your peace of mind, your purpose, or your emotional well-being. What good is walking in step if one of you is silently poisoning the path? What good is keeping the peace on the outside if your spirit is at war every time they enter the room? God never asked you to suffer for the sake of appearances. He called you to walk in truth. And truth, when it rises, has a way of exposing the darkest corners of even the most familiar places. Sometimes that includes family. There are people who cannot stand your light, not because you've wronged them, but because it highlights the shadows they haven't dealt with in themselves. And rather than face those shadows, they try to snuff out your glow. But let me remind you, you don't owe anyone your light. You don't have to dim it. You don't have to apologize for being chosen. You don't have to feel guilty for being blessed, for rising, for thriving. If your sibling can't clap when you win, that speaks more about their heart than it ever will about yours. And yes, I know it hurts, because you never asked for competition. You asked for connection. You never sought a rivalry. You longed for relationship. But sometimes what we hoped would be a family turns into a battlefield. And if it does, it is not your burden to fix it alone. You pray, you forgive, you heal. But you also protect your spirit, because sabotage dressed up in love is still sabotage. And jealousy masked as concern is still a curse waiting for a chance to strike. So today I want you to walk in truth. I want you to stop hiding your wins. Stop shrinking your voice. Stop explaining your joy like it needs permission. Stop dimming your smile just to keep someone else from frowning. God brought you too far for you to play small now. And if those closest to you can only clap when they feel bigger than you, then they were never really with you. Let them wrestle with their reflection. Let them face the envy they've buried deep in their heart. That is not your burden to carry. Your only job is to keep walking in the light God gave you. Keep showing up. Keep building. Keep believing. And don't you dare let the silent jealousy of a sibling rob you of what was always meant for you, because you see, there's a sacred place inside each of us where trust lives. A quiet chamber of the heart where we store the softest parts of our soul. The fears we never speak aloud. The childhood memories we tuck away. The pain we try to mask with laughter. The tears that still come when no one's watching. And when you have a sibling, someone who shared that sacred space, you expect it to be safe. You believe sometimes without even questioning that they'll guard what you've shared. Now that they'll protect your secrets like treasure, not twist them into weapons. Soft transition to page 4. Hey, sure. But what happens when the one you trusted with your soul becomes the one who uses it against you? Let's take a deeper step into that betrayal on the next page. Opening bridge line to maintain flow. When someone you've trusted with your soul turns your truth into a weapon, it's not just betrayal, it cuts deeper. Because some wounds are carved from the inside out. When a sibling uses your vulnerabilities against you, it doesn't just hurt, it violates. This isn't just about broken trust, it's about the deep sacred places of your heart being twisted into ammunition. You didn't open up because you were weak. You opened up because you trusted. You chose to be seen when it was hard to even breathe. You shared from a place of rawness on days when your soul was weary, when life felt too heavy to carry alone, when you just needed someone to listen, not judge. Maybe you shared your struggles with anxiety. Maybe you opened up about a fragile season in your marriage. Maybe you admitted to a private battle, a mistake, a hidden sin you were trying to bring into the light. And in that moment, they nodded, they listened. It felt safe for a time, but later, they didn't hold it sacred. They threw it back in your face. Maybe during a heated argument, maybe as gossip whispered behind your back, maybe as a joke made in front of others at your expense. They didn't always drop you loudly. No, sometimes they dropped you in silence with a subtle slip of your secret shared with just one person. Sometimes they mentioned your past in public, laughing it off like it meant nothing. Or worse, they whispered, "You know what she's really like?" Planting seeds of shame that grew into judgment in rooms you didn't even enter. That's not love. That's not family. That's betrayal wearing a familiar face. And hear me clearly, you do not owe forgiveness that leaves your soul open to be wounded again. Because when someone takes your pain, the very thing you trusted them with, and turns it into their power that tells you everything you need to know about their heart. That's not just thoughtlessness. That's not a simple mistake. That's malice. That's a conscious decision to dishonor your story, to break something that cannot be easily repaired, even if they say, "I didn't mean it." The damage is done. The crack has formed. The silence between you feels different now, heavier, colder. And so you begin to withhold, not out of pettiness, not out of revenge, but out of wisdom. Because you've learned that not everyone who says "I love you" is equipped to guard the fragile parts of your soul. And maybe you've tried to overlook it. You've told yourself that's just how they are. You've tried to maintain peace, but deep down, you felt the cost. You felt the grief of losing not only trust, but the version of yourself that once believed they'd never turn on you. That kind of wound is real, and that's why you don't forget betrayals like this, because they teach you something sacred. They teach you that not everyone close to you is safe enough to carry your truth. Some people will confuse forgiveness with access. They think that once you say, I forgive you, the door is wide open again. That you'll go right back to laughing at the dinner table, sharing your soul, pretending like nothing happened. But true wisdom, godly wisdom, says otherwise. True wisdom is, I forgive you, but I cannot trust you the same way again. That's not hate. That's not vengeance. That's protection. That's what discernment looks like when you begin to honor the sacred within you. Don't let guilt trick you into staying silent. Don't let shame convince you that you are wrong for opening your heart. You were right to love. You were right to trust. What they did was wrong, but your heart was pure. And here's something you need to hear. Your vulnerability is still a gift. Even if someone mishandled it, just because they didn't know how to treasure your openness doesn't mean you should become someone who never opens again. It simply means this: now you learn, now you discern, now you ask yourself, not who speaks the loudest, but who has proven over time they will cover you, not expose you. Soft transition to page 5. And when you begin to see clearly, when your heart finally understands who's worthy of access, you also begin to heal differently. Let's walk into that healing together on the next page. Opening bridge line. When someone mishandles your vulnerability, you begin to learn who truly deserves access to the deepest parts of you. And sometimes that includes your own sibling. I know what you might be thinking, but it's my sibling. Shouldn't I try again? Shouldn't I give them another chance? The answer? Only if the fruit has changed. Only if repentance has taken root. If you can see evidence of real growth, real humility, real transformation. Otherwise, you're walking barefoot into broken glass, hoping that this time, maybe, somehow, it won't cut you. But that's not faith. That's not love. That's self-sacrifice at the altar of denial. And God did not call you to bleed quietly for the sake of keeping peace. God wants you healed, whole, free, not caught in endless cycles that rip your heart open again and again. So if you've been carrying the weight of that betrayal, if you've been stuffing it down to protect the family image, please hear this. It's not your fault. And no, you don't have to pretend it didn't happen just to keep the bond intact. If your sibling used your pain to shame you, if they weaponized your trust or stood by while others did, you have every right to set a boundary, to say, I still love you, but you no longer have access to the softest parts of me. That's not cruelty, that's clarity. And sometimes, clarity is the very first step toward healing, because not all betrayal comes crashing down in a dramatic storm. Sometimes it arrives slowly, quietly, like a slow leak that eventually floods the foundation. It's not just what they said, it's what they refused to say. It's not always what they did, it's what they refused to do. I'm talking about the moments when your siblings stood by in silence, when others ridiculed you, gossiped about you, spread lies or accusations, and they said nothing. They watched it happen, and they chose not to get involved. That kind of silence, especially from family, it can be louder than any insult shouted across a room. Because when someone you love is under fire, what does love do? Love steps in. Love speaks up. Love says, not on my watch. But when the people closest to you choose silence, that silence becomes its own kind of betrayal. And here's the truth. Silence is not always innocent. Sometimes silence is agreement, wearing the mask of neutrality. When someone's hurting and you choose to stay quiet, you are choosing a side. You're choosing comfort over courage, peacekeeping over truth. It's easier, right? To shrug and say, I don't want to get involved. To whisper, that's between them. But when that them is your own brother, your sister, your family, you don't get the luxury of indifference. Because your silence tells the world, I'm okay with what's happening to them. And maybe now you're remembering. Maybe you're thinking back to the moments when you were misjudged, when people whispered lies, when you were misunderstood, accused, dismissed, maybe even humiliated, and you looked around for just one voice, just one person to stand beside you. And there they were, your sibling, not standing with you, but standing off to the side. They didn't throw the stones, but they didn't stop them either. That kind of absence, it leaves a wound, not always visible, but always deep. Because what you expected was an arm around your shoulder. What you got was a turn back. And sometimes the betrayal isn't public. It shows up privately in the quiet moments when you needed encouragement and they gave you silence. When you were drowning in doubt and they didn't offer a word of life. When others made you feel small and they just sat there letting it happen. That kind of betrayal is slow, but it's real and it stays with you. Soft transition to page 6. So what do you do with that pain? That silence? That space where love should have been but wasn't? Let's talk about that next on page 6. Opening bridge line. When silence replaces support and absence speaks louder than presence, the wound left behind isn't just disappointment, it's a quiet kind of grief. It hurts more than we often admit, doesn't it? Because when a stranger betrays you, you can recover, you can create distance, you can move on without too much weight. But when the betrayal comes wrapped in silence, from someone you love, from your own family, that's the kind that lingers. It doesn't scream. It doesn't slam the door. It just seeps into you quietly, repeatedly. And before you even realize it, it's teaching you something. It teaches you to stop expecting backup, to stop hoping someone will step in and say, that's enough. It teaches you to keep everything inside because history has taught you when it mattered most, they didn't show up. So what do? You grow strong, but not because they helped you. You grow strong because they didn't. You become resilient, not because of their encouragement, but because of their silence. And while that strength may be admirable, while people look at you and say, wow, you're so tough, only you know the cost, because deep down, you never wanted to walk alone. You just had to. Let me say something that might set someone free today. You are not bitter for feeling hurt by their silence. You are not wrong for remembering the moments they didn't speak up. You are not overreacting by acknowledging how much it broke your heart. That pain is real. That disappointment is valid. No, you don't have to carry resentment in your heart forever. But also, you don't have to pretend like nothing happened. Forgiveness doesn't mean rewriting the story. It doesn't mean pretending they stood with you when they didn't. It doesn't mean ignoring the moment your perspective of them changed. Sometimes, forgiveness means finally being honest with yourself. Telling the truth that they could have done more, that they should have done more. Now some might say, well, maybe they didn't know what to say. But let's be clear, silence in the face of wrong is not confusion, it's consent. When your silence protects the wrong voices, it betrays the right ones. And no, you don't have to raise your voice. You don't have to start a war, but you can stand firm. You can say, this isn't right. You can say, that's my sister, that's my brother. Don't talk about him like that. You can choose not to laugh at the cruel jokes. You can shut down the gossip. You can stand beside the one being torn apart. instead of silently siding with the ones doing the tearing. So if you've been the one wounded by that silence, if you've watched your own family sit quiet while others attacked you, please hear this. Your worth is not measured by who stood with you. Your value is not lost because they didn't defend it. God saw what happened. He heard the words they didn't say. And even when they wouldn't fight for you, He still is. Let that be your peace. Because when a sibling stands by and lets the world tear you down, they've already made their choice. And there's a certain kind of sting that cuts even deeper than betrayal. It's the sting of success when the ones who were supposed to celebrate you quietly begin to resent you. When you start walking in your purpose, when God begins opening doors in your life, when blessings begin to pour in, some of the very people who should be clapping for you go silent. They don't say, "I'm proud of you." They say nothing at all, or worse. They speak behind your back, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your elevation turned up the volume on their own insecurities. Not every betrayal is loud. Not every dagger comes with a scream. Some come wrapped in sarcasm, in avoidance, in subtle cold indifference. You begin to feel it. They stop asking how you're doing, not because they're busy, but because they don't want to hear how well you're doing. They begin to distance themselves, not because you pushed them away, but because your light made them uncomfortable. They make sly remarks when others praise you. They shift in their seat when your name comes up. And the more you grow, the colder they become. Soft transition to page 7. But what do you do when your growth becomes someone else's trigger? When the people you love can't seem to love the version of you that's rising? Let's talk about that in the next part. Opening bridge line. When your rise becomes uncomfortable for the people closest to you, especially your own family, it creates a silent kind of heartbreak. One that's hard to name but impossible to ignore. There's a kind of betrayal that's difficult to put into words. Not because it was loud, not because it was violent, but because on the surface it looked like nothing. And yet, deep down, you know something sacred shifted. It's hard, isn't it? When you used to share your dreams with them, when you thought they'd always be the first to clap, the first to cheer, the first to show up when it was finally your moment to shine. But now, you're standing on your mountaintop, finally walking in your calling, finally seeing the fruit of your faith. And the ones you expected to be by your side are nowhere to be found. That loneliness is something success can't fix. Because you didn't just want the breakthrough, you wanted to share it. You didn't just want to rise, you wanted them to rise with you. You didn't just want progress, you wanted them to be proud. But sometimes the very people who should be rejoicing with you are the ones who quietly turn their backs the moment the spotlight touches your name. And what's even more painful? Some will try to downplay what God is doing in your life. They'll say, "You've changed." But the truth is, it's not you who changed. It's their perception that shifted. You didn't abandon them. You didn't become someone you're not. You just grew. You matured. You stepped into the purpose God wrote for you before you were born. And instead of being inspired by that, they let jealousy creep in and drive a wedge. When jealousy takes root in a sibling's heart, love starts to wither. What used to be admiration becomes comparison. What used to be unity becomes competition. And suddenly you're not just fighting for your dreams. You're fighting to protect your peace. Let's be real. This is the part many don't like to say out loud. Sometimes your biggest critics carry your last name. Sometimes the ones sabotaging your spirit don't live across town. They sit across the table, as they've known you since childhood, and for reasons they may not even fully understand. They can't accept that God chose to bless you in a way they weren't ready for. But here's the truth you need to hold on to. That's not your fault. And it is not your job to dim your light to make someone else feel more comfortable in their darkness. You were never meant to bury your calling just so someone else could feel taller. God's favor on your life isn't up for debate. It's not dependent on your siblings' approval, and if their love couldn't survive your breakthrough, then it wasn't rooted in truth to begin with. Because real love doesn't resent, it rejoices. It says, I'm happy for you, even if I'm not there yet. Real love doesn't compete, it completes. And if a sibling can't handle your success, that reveals more about their heart than it ever will about your journey. Maybe you've wrestled with guilt. Maybe you've caught yourself wondering, should I tone it down? Should I make myself smaller just to keep the peace? But listen closely. Never dim the fire God lit in you just because someone else refuses to fan their own. You are not responsible for how they handle your elevation. You are only responsible for carrying your calling with humility, grace, and obedience. This isn't about bitterness. This is about freedom. Freedom from constantly needing to explain yourself. Freedom from apologizing for your growth. Freedom to rise even when it's lonely. If you've been betrayed by a jealous sibling, let this truth sink in. It wasn't your fault. You don't have to keep proving yourself. You don't have to shrink just to make others feel secure. You can grieve the relationship that once was. You can honor the love you thought you had, but then you still choose to rise. Because sometimes real peace means accepting that not everyone you love will be able to love the version of you that God is shaping. And even so, bless them. Soft transition to the final page. Because when you bless what hurt you, you finally release what held you. Let's close this journey together in the final chapter. Opening bridge line. You blessed them even after they broke you. But in blessing what hurt you, you began to reclaim what betrayal tried to take. Your voice, your peace, your purpose. Love them, but don't let their silence steal your joy. Don't let their distance make you question your direction. Because God didn't elevate you to impress people. He lifted you to fulfill purpose. And anyone who truly loves you, anyone who truly sees you, will celebrate the hand of God on your life, even if they don't fully understand it. Even if they're not walking the same road. Let your rise be your testimony. Let your growth be your worship. And if your siblings won't clap for you, keep walking anyway, because heaven is already standing. Some betrayals don't begin with harsh words or hateful actions. They begin with access. They begin the moment you open your heart, your home, your whole life to someone you thought would protect it. And when that someone is your own sibling, it feels even more natural. You're not just sharing resources, you're sharing your soul. You open the door to your deepest self thinking, surely they'll guard this. Because blood means loyalty, right? Family means safety, doesn't it? But one day you turn around and the very person you trusted most has taken what was sacred and used it against you. It's a betrayal that cuts slow, cuts deep. Not because it came from a stranger, but because it came from someone you never expected. You offered help, and they used it as leverage. You gave them a seat at your table, and they turned it into a place of gossip. You shared your burdens, your fears, your secrets, and instead of guarding them, they exposed them. Sometimes they did it out of spite, sometimes out of jealousy, and sometimes just to gain favor with someone else. And now you're left sitting in that space of disbelief, wondering how someone so close could turn so cold. Because it's not just the betrayal that hurts, it's the shock of who did it. You begin to question everything. Was it my fault? Did I trust too easily? Did I miss the signs? But the truth? There aren't always signs. Sometimes your love, your loyalty, blinds you to their resentment. You were trying to carry them, but they were silently studying you, waiting for a moment when you were vulnerable enough to strike. And it's not just what they did, it's how intentional it was. They knew what mattered most to you. They knew who you loved. They knew your weak spots, and still they chose to cross the line. They brought division where there was once unity. They weaponized your words, your tears, your trust. They twisted your honesty into ammunition, not because you were naive, but because you were real, you were generous with your heart. And they took that gift and made it a weapon. That kind of betrayal doesn't just make you doubt them, it makes you question everyone. You start building walls, not just around your heart, but around your entire life. You stop letting people in. You stop sharing your struggles, your dreams, your fears, because now you've learned sometimes the one you're protecting is the one preparing to wound you, and the silence you slip into. That's not peace, it's survival. It's the kind of silence that whispers, I'd rather be alone out and be betrayed again. And maybe you're listening now, remembering that moment when you gave and gave and gave, and they took and left you broken. Soft transition to final reflection or call to action. But what if that silence could become sacred? What if healing doesn't mean reopening the door, but restoring your strength on the other side of it? Let's bring this journey to its closing truth. Their opening bridge line, you gave them your trust, your time, your love, only to discover they were slowly turning those gifts into weapons. And now you're left not just with the wound, but the silence of having no one believe how deep it cut. You pulled them out of a pit, and when your back was turned, they started digging one for you. You defended them in rooms where your name was later dragged through the dirt. You stayed up late, whispering prayers for their breakthrough, while they were quietly undermining your peace. And the hardest part? It's not just a betrayal. It's how unbelievable it all sounds. Who would believe it? Who would believe that someone with your blood, your history, your last name could be so cold, so calculating, so ungrateful? But hear me clearly today. Just because they betrayed you doesn't mean you were wrong to love them. It doesn't mean your heart was foolish. It doesn't mean your kindness was wasted. You don't have to regret the love you gave, and you don't have to harden your heart to protect it either. You just have to become wiser, because wisdom says, I can forgive you, but I will never give you that kind of access again. Wisdom says, I can wish you peace, but I will not hand you the keys to my spirit, because wisdom, it knows the difference between helping someone and enabling a pattern that keeps tearing you down. You see, forgiveness doesn't mean erasing the pain. It doesn't mean pretending the betrayal never happened. Forgiveness means releasing the weight of what happened into the hands of a God who saw it all. It means saying, I will not let your betrayal become the prison that keeps me stuck. It means healing without reopening the door. Yes, reconciliation is beautiful, but it's not always possible. And it should never be forced, because some people, they'll never own the damage they caused. They'll smile, they'll perform, they'll pretend, and you'll find yourself questioning your memory. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I misunderstood. But here's the truth you need to hold on to. You don't need their confession to find your closure. What you need is clarity. Clarity that says what you did was not okay. I don't have to hate you to move on, but I also don't have to trust you again. Clarity that understands family is meant to protect, not exploit. And just because we share a bloodline doesn't mean you get unlimited access to my life. clarity builds boundaries, and boundaries, they lead to healing. If that betrayal still echoes in your heart, if the memory of what they took from you still stings in quiet moments, know this: God saw it. He is not blind to the injustice. He knows the weight you carried in silence. He knows the price you paid for peace, and He will restore what was broken. He will honor the purity of your heart. He will bring peace where pain once lived. So today, choose freedom. Let them go, not because they deserve it, but because you do. So I've transitioned to conclusion. And if you're wondering how to move forward with wisdom, how to love without losing yourself again, stay with me. Let's close this chapter together and walk toward healing.